Hello, everyone, and welcome to another elite episode of the Get Authentic with Marques show. I'm your host, Marques Ogden. On today's episode, we are joined by Mr. Michael Erath. But before we bring up Michael to the stage, we want to thank one of our amazing sponsors. We want to thank the Help for Men Brotherhood. Ralph Brewer and his awesome organization was established to help men going through a divorce, trauma, or trying to get their life back on track. They have a great group of individuals where you can get knowledge, gain insight, and have a great place of community to help men reignite and to refine their purpose. We thank Mr. Ralph Brewer and the Help for Men Brotherhood for sponsoring this amazing episode. Now, here he is. Mike, how you doing today, Michael?
I'm doing great, Marques. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, my friend. Michael, first question, sir. What does the word authentic/authenticity mean to you?
I would say for me, it's coming from a genuine place of knowing yourself and being very true to that and what you say, what you do, how you behave.
Love, love it. You know, what's very interesting, right, Michael, is people are constantly saying, well, I think I want to be like this because somebody else wants me to be like that. Or I think I should be this way because everybody else says I should be that way. And I tell people, right, Michael, it's not about what others think you should do. It's about what you know in your heart of hearts that you should do. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think it's important to learn how to love yourself and who you are so that you can be that. Because otherwise, you're constantly chasing what other people say. And I think also in order to do that, you've got to be able to get right with your past, your mistakes, your successes, your failures, and be able to come to terms with that in a way that you feel good about yourself, feel like you're enough. And when you're able to feel that way about yourself, regardless of what you've been through, it's easier to be authentic.
I love that. Michael, please tell us a little bit more about yourself, your journey, and what you're doing currently now to help your client base.
Sure. So I'll make this as succinct as I can. I got started on my career. I was the second generation in a family business. We manufactured hardwood veneers for the furniture, kitchen cabinet industry. We had a manufacturing facility in Virginia and our sales offices in North Carolina. So I spent about 20 years growing that business. We were about $8 million when we started, 70, give or take 70 employees. And by 2008 had grown that to about a $45 million business with around 200 employees. One of the things I had done along the way was I wanted to vertically integrate the business, and I brought on a partner and set up a subsidiary company to start actually purchasing standing timber because we needed better access to the raw materials. So in doing that, my partner and I became best friends. I became his son's godfather. We vacationed a lot together with our families. And as the housing market collapse started to happen in 2008, we were facing all those external pressures. At the same time, I found out not only had he been embezzling, he'd embezzled over $500,000, but he was committing bank fraud. So both businesses were banking with the same lender. And so we were kind of viewed under one umbrella. My father had passed away several years earlier. We had transacted my mother out of the business. But about 2 years before I found this out, we took out a $6 million term note to reinvest in some equipment and to expand our production facility. My mother, who no longer had equity in the business, was stuck on the bank guarantee for that term note. So when we discovered what my partner had done, we brought in a retired FBI forensic accountant that was doing private investigation work. He helped us piece together what had actually happened. And on the same day, we went to the bank and we went to the US Attorney's Office with what we had discovered. So at that time, most companies that were struggling going into the housing market collapse were just given the keys to the bank and letting the attorneys sort out the details. I needed us to figure out a way to avoid bankruptcy going through all of this. My partner ended up being prosecuted, spent 2 years in federal prison. The bank froze all of our accounts. We became illiquid overnight during one of the worst financial recessions we've had in the last 100 years. So it was really a perfect storm. And the one piece of leverage I had was, rather than just turning it over to the bank and my mother having to deal with going through the bankruptcy proceedings and being at risk, if I could convince them to allow me to unwind the business over time, I could both delay anything that might happen and hopefully could get them closer to being made whole. So I think at that time I was one less fire to fight, and they agreed to give me enough liquidity to maintain operations for the purposes of unwinding the business. So it took about 18 months to do that. Was able to, I had some very fortunate breaks, got the bank made whole, got the creditors made whole, and my wife and I took the haircut. We were in our mid 30s at the time. But we kind of took this attitude, we needed to live to fight another day. And I needed to figure out how to protect my mother since my father had passed. So that worked. We moved to Ohio, stayed in the same industry, but started a new business on the back end of this. There was a contract manufacturer, so we restarted a business from scratch, outsourced all of our production, grew that business, and I got really interested in the science behind how great businesses built systems and structures to really be able to scale and scale their impact and grow the business. And I implemented a lot of tools and things in that business. There's a business operating system called EOS. It stands for the
Mm-hmm.
Entrepreneur Operating System, book
Yep,
track.
of course, of course.
So I went down that path, and I did a very hybrid kind of self-implementation of EOS, and we had a lot of success with that. Grew from a startup to about 7 million. In 2015, I exited that business, and I actually became an EOS implementer. Did
Mm.
that for about 5 years, and I felt like I had such a unique background as a business owner that I had a higher or greater purpose and could serve a better purpose by taking those lessons and that history I had and using that to teach and coach others. Um, I went down the EOS path, and initially we worked under a license agreement. So I was able to teach things beyond EOS and bring other tools from other systems and really create a kind of hybrid customized approach for my clients. But in 2020, I believe it was, EOS transitioned to a franchise model. And the franchise contracts, it forbade us from teaching anything that was not EOS. And so it really kind of it would have devalued me with my clients. And so at that point, I decided to leave EOS and start my own framework and build out my own framework, which became the 5 Obsessions of Elite Organizations. So it's more of a flexible, customizable approach than it is a constraining approach. And I think at the end of the day, entrepreneurs' brains aren't wired to be constrained. And for early stage business owners and entrepreneurs, the constraints can be helpful, but they can eventually become limiting as you become more mature and start to grow and evolve your business and expand. So that's the 5 minute abridged version. I wrote a book about the whole journey with the collapse in 2017, published that one, and then more recently in March of this year published the 5 Obsessions of Elite Organizations.
You know, Michael, this is fantastic because unfortunately, you went through a very challenging time with the business as a result of someone that you trusted stealing from you, taking, abusing your friendship, abusing, the right to run a very successful, very, well operated business. And there was a struggle with your mom and things of that nature. And then here you are when things hit the fan, you didn't run, you didn't quit, you stayed in it, you fought through it, and you were able to get yourself in a much better position. You paid the bank back, paid the creditors back. Like you said, you took a little bit of a haircut yourself, and that's very admirable. And I want you to explain to people, right, how big that is. Because here's my next question, right? Talk about your book, right? And it's called The 5 Obsessions of Elite Organizations, correct?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, so I would love to hear, and I cannot see them on the back, of course, but I'd love to hear your 5 because I think that's something that's very important,
Mhm.
and I think it could help a lot of people in that regard.
So what I discovered when I decided I wanted to kind of go my own path and create my own framework and approach. Really was really focused on whether it's whether it's a truly elite business organization, sports organization, what are the principles that are really behind the greatness, and what's the congruency, what's the same across. I mean, you think about Phil Jackson, what he did with the Bulls went on to do with the Lakers. Think about Nick Saban from a sports perspective, and then think about great business organizations. What I discovered is at their core, every great organization obsesses, and I use the word obsession specifically because I think to be elite, you have to be obsessed about it. But they obsess about great people, finding ways to get very clear on what makes for a great person to be part of this organization and building systems and structures to ensure that we're able to achieve that. The second obsession is an inspiring purpose. And I think a lot of organizations look at this from an external marketing, how do we communicate our purpose, things like that. But as you know from your career, when a team of people or a group of people can form an emotional attachment to the work they do because they're clear on the internal purpose of what it is that they're doing, they will always bring more energy, passion, creativity to the work that they do. You think about showing up for training as a professional athlete. If you're showing up to training to go through the training versus showing up for the training to go through building a team that can win championships, that can win, you're going to bring different energy and effort. And I think organizations, especially business organizations, really miss an opportunity to market the right messaging internally to their employees, to their team members, to help them understand how their role connects to a much bigger purpose than just the transactional work. So I think an inspiring purpose is the second obsession, is how you take great people and compound the effect of having those great people working together. The third obsession is optimized playbooks. I was a pilot for a number of years. You think about, again, great sports organizations, pilots flying airplanes, they're trained on the thousands of pages of manuals, but every time they play, they're following a playbook. I'm sorry, every time they fly the plane, they're following a playbook. Sports teams are successful because if you got 11 guys on the field and you're all running off the same playbook, as long as everybody's executing their role in that play the way it's designed to be executed, the plays work. And so we don't do that often in our organizations, but there's so much that happens within a business that is predictable and that is intended to be done the same way time and time again. We just don't provide those checklists and playbooks for people to follow. So we miss an opportunity there to really systemize the way we do things. The fourth is a culture of performance. So building systems within an organization to create feedback loops for individuals based on the expectations you have of someone in their role. Are you as a leader consistently communicating to them and helping them understand where they're meeting expectations, where they're coming up short, and then having within the organization an actual system in place by which we coach people up or coach people out, and doing that in a way that's intended to develop and coach people. But some people are not coachable. Some people may be in a role they don't have the aptitude for, and they're just never going to really be successful in that role. And we have to have a systemized approach to how we address those things that can scale, that we can teach other leaders how to follow, so that we don't find ourselves doing what most organizations do and tolerate mediocrity for way too long. We keep mediocre performers around. It hurts the organizations, hurts the teams, it hurts those individuals because they know they're not performing. And then the fifth and final obsession is growing profits and cash flow. And I think this is something, and I get kind of bent out of shape over this one. I hear so many people in my line of work as business coaches say that profit and cash is a byproduct of doing everything else right. And I think that's intellectually lazy. I think if you treat profit and cash flow as a byproduct, that's all it ever will be. And if you really believe in your purpose, that profitability and cash flow is the fuel you use to reinvest in expanding and doing more of what it is that you believe in as a purpose. So those are the five. And then we can go as deep as you want on anything, but we've got lots of different frameworks and tools that we can help customize to the individual user to help them excel in those 5 areas.
This is great, ladies and gentlemen. So again, I see on the wall, great people, inspiring purposes, optimized approach. I mean, all these things, these five obsessions are awesome. And I took note of a couple things, right? Number one, to be elite, you have to be obsessed. Something else I wrote down that I thought was really powerful. Coach people up or coach people out, right? Ladies and gentlemen, some people, no matter how hard you try to coach them, they're not going to pick it up. So again, if someone has shown you they can't, then you have to coach them out. Or means you have to unfortunately let them go. Because again, if you're wasting valuable time on the wrong person or the wrong people, unfortunately, it doesn't matter how much you try to change someone. If they're not apt to changing, or they don't have the bandwidth, the brain power, the knowledge, the skill set, the savvy, all you're doing is making it much harder on yourself as that business owner. Because at the end of the day, it's all tied back to systems. I think cash and profit, all that type of stuff, is tied back to systems, how you operate, how you do things. It's just not about business or you do it right, it's making money. That's not true. You have to have systems, you have to have things in place. And like I tell people, right, Michael, you cannot scale beyond yourself if you don't have conviction and or you don't have people taking care of the small mundane things, because the small mundane things, if they don't get done, the organization won't thrive. Here's my question, right, Michael? I do a lot of coaching myself, and I'm doing some stuff with my clients right now, end of the year, going to next year.
Mhm.
And I tell clients, right? I told one of this to my clients today. High performing people do not join small and or very non large visions, right? High performing people don't join small dreams and or visions,
Yep.
period. So my question is, right, Michael, how do you help people get out of their own way with your book, with your wisdom, with your experience, so they can start attracting high performing people as they continue to move down the path? And then from there, right, Michael, they can start to build something that is becoming self sustaining and a legacy organization.
Sure. So a couple of things in that. I think it's interesting what you were just describing. There's on our YouTube channel, one of the videos, a short video I've got, is of Nick Saban talking about it, and it was really when I was pivoting from EOS to this framework. It was actually a speech I saw him give where he talks about his 5 choices, which you may have seen him talk about.
Mhm.
And he talks about, of all the choices of, we can be bad, we can be average, we can be good. It was about choosing to be excellent or elite, but what it takes from you if you're really going to make a choice to try to be excellent or elite. And he talks about this whole idea that high achievers do not like mediocre performers, and mediocre performers don't like high achievers, right? And so if you don't have in your organization a standard that is set from leadership down and stay to that standard, you'll never really have any chemistry or culture within your organization, because you'll have this disconnect between high achievers and mediocre performers. So one of the things early that we find is the entrepreneur eventually will grow the business to a point where they become the bottleneck. And
Mhm.
the it was interesting. When I was working on the book, I did some research. There are currently 53,000 people on LinkedIn in the United States who call themselves a business coach. It's a
Mm.
very crowded space.
Mm.
And so I think, from our perspective is, and we refer to ourselves more as guides than coaches, because I feel like um, we don't coach our clients on a specific system or thing. We guide them on their journey as a business owner. And so one of the things I did as a differentiator with Next Level Growth is, in most organizations, anybody can be a coach. If you'll write the check for 30 or 50 grand to sign up to be a coach and do their program, you can be a coach. Uh, I wanted to set a standard that nobody could be a guide at Next Level Growth if they had not been an owner or CEO of a business with at least 10 million in revenue and at least 50 employees. So we've all grown our own business, and we've been there and done that to a certain scale. And so what happens, I find, is if we're sitting down with an owner who is the bottleneck in the business, they are much more open to take that feedback from us because it's a peer-to-peer conversation versus someone who's never been there or done that. And we oftentimes, and I'm sure you have to do the same thing, sometimes we have to get very direct um, in how we talk to someone who's just got a blind spot, and they're not, it's their reluctance to admit it or face it that's the problem. um, so I think with owners who have reached that point where kind of they're the bottleneck, they're in their own way, we have to be able to find ways to communicate that and get them to see it. And honestly, Marques, if they can't, I mean, we fire clients, and oftentimes it's because they either become uncoachable because they won't face the facts, or they don't follow through and do the work. And so I think you have to be willing, if you're in this coaching world, you have to be willing to fire clients and deal with the short-term revenue impact of losing a client versus keep someone around who's not going to do the work. So we're very transparent about that. We let people know that all the time. If they're not getting value, we don't have contracts, they can fire us right away. And likewise, if we feel like they're not doing the work or they're not enjoyable to work with, we're going to fire them.
Michael, it's very interesting. You talk a lot about helping people understand how to improve their culture. You talk a lot about helping people to understand how to really assess situations and assess the business. I think this is fantastic. And so it's really interesting, right, Michael? So many people, I'm gonna go to that question about LinkedIn, right? So 53,000 people on LinkedIn say, I'm a coach, I'm a coach, I'm a coach. And
Right.
it's funny, right, Mike? I started a coaching business in 2016, got a couple clients here, nothing substantial. Then I went to a program that the NFL was doing a partnership with NAPSA, National Athletic Professional Success Academy, which was held at Penn State. It was amazing. And I tell people at this event, at this 5-day intensive training, I learned a couple of big things for me as a speaker, right? Number one, how to have great stage presence. Number two, how to have great audience engagement. Number three, how to educate your audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke at event, and they're like, oh, things really weren't great with the content, and this is like early in my career. And so I had to learn, right? And I've learned, and I continue to grow and push forward. But I love this because, Michael, this is the whole essence, I feel, of what the work we do. So again, the last question, can you please just tell us a little bit more about the book, title, what they can expect to gain, and why did you write this awesome book project?
So the the reason really behind the book, and I think so, you're familiar with EOS and traction, and I think when Gino
Mhm.
Wickman wrote Traction and published that in 2007, what was really brilliant about the strategy behind that book is he gave away most of what he teaches, right? And so the book became the blueprint for how to do it versus just talking at a theoretical or conceptual level without a blueprint on, well, here's how you actually go do it. So when we evolved beyond EOS, I really wanted to follow that same strategy. And so people who read the book, it's essentially the first chapter is a chapter on understanding why you need a system within your business, why you need to create your own business operating system. The second chapter just walks through the evolution of business operating systems, um, going back, going back really into the early 1900s, all the way through now. And then starting with the third chapter, it walks you through each obsession. And in each one of these, I actually write about here's how we facilitate this with our clients. So if you want to do this on your own, you can follow the book as the framework, and you can absolutely do this yourself. For smaller organizations, that's a benefit. And I actually built an AI clone for people who want additional guidance beyond just the book, but they can't afford to or don't want to hire a guide to work with
Mhm.
directly. They can work with my AI clone to get insights and guidance to help them along the way. Um, But for each of these 5 obsessions, it lays out, here are different ways clients have used this and customized it. Here's how you do it yourself. Here's how you and your team can work through the tool to get to the outcome that we're trying to achieve. So it's not, it doesn't read like a textbook, but it gives you kind of textbook step-by-step instructions on how to do things with client stories and things like that mixed in. So you can find it on Amazon. There's an audiobook as well. And there's a website, 5obsessions.com, where you can also link to get the book, download resources, things like that.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is fantastic. Again, if you're looking for ways to up your game, if you're looking for ways to get more information, if you're looking for ways to get new strategies to help you in your business and create systems, and again, love what Michael's all about, because in order to scale, right, in a business, you have to have emotion, you have to have logic, right? So on the emotion side, we call that like a dream or a plan. On the logic side, we call it a system. Okay, you have to have systems in place. Great interview, Michael. How can people, or where can people go to get in touch with you?
Nextlevelgrowth.com is the easiest place to start. You can connect with me directly there. You can connect with me through the AI clone. The clone is at askmichaelerath.com. But nextlevelgrowth.com is the best place to start. We've even got an assessment on there that you can take to see how you're currently performing in each of these 5 obsessions. And from that, you'll get additional insights and guidance and some free resources that you can download and use to start helping yourself on that journey to building something truly elite.
Ladies and gentlemen, please support Michael. Go to his website, check out his information, connect with him, and have a conversation. It's free, but get up and reach and make that call and get things started. Now, we want to thank our amazing sponsor, the Help for Men Brotherhood, owned by Mr. Ralph Brewer and his partners. And the authentic tip of this great interview: in business, if you want to have success, you have to set up systems. You have to get systems set up. If systems aren't set up, you won't get where you want to go. It's not going to happen. Again, my name is Marques Ogden. I am the host of the Get Authentic with Marques show. Thanks for tuning in. Have a fantastic day.
Recording stopped.
Nice job, Michael.
Awesome.